It's 6:15 on a Sunday morning, and you're ironing a shirt you've owned for 6 years. The iron hisses. The kitchen light is the only one on in the building. Outside, a recycling truck groans down the street, and somewhere below, a car alarm chirps twice and goes quiet. Your kitchen table is the same laminate table you bought secondhand for $60 the year you moved in. There's a chip in the corner from when you dropped a mug. You've never replaced it. Your coffee is instant. 91 cents a cup if you buy the big jar. Your bank app is open on the counter, screen still lit from when you checked it a minute ago. $1,142,600. You look at it the way you'd look at a weather report. Mildly. Then you go back to ironing. Nobody on your floor knows that number. Not your neighbor, who leases a car you couldn't be bothered to lease. Not your co-workers, who assume your modest apartment means a modest life. You've let them assume it, because correcting them has never once seemed worth the conversation. Here's the contradiction, and it's the whole reason this story exists. You look poor, and you are, by any visible measure, quietly one of the wealthiest people you know. Not because you got lucky, not because you inherited anything, because somewhere along the way you stopped trying to look rich and started trying to become rich, and it turned out those two things pull in almost opposite directions. You don't know yet how you got so comfortable with that gap. You don't know yet what it will eventually cost you. But it started, like most things do, with a much smaller number, in a much smaller apartment, a long time before this one. Level 1. The math of not enough. 9 years earlier. You're 24. Your studio apartment is 410 square feet, and the radiator makes a sound at night like something dragging a chain. Rent is $890. Your paycheck, after taxes, is $2,410 a month from a job in claims processing that you took because it was the first thing that said yes. You keep a notebook, not an app, a physical notebook, because the first time you tried a budgeting app, it made you feel worse watching a pie chart confirm what you already knew. Rent, $890. Student loan minimum, $210. Car insurance, $96. Groceries, somewhere between $220 and $260, depending on the month. Whatever's left goes to a savings account with $340 in it. $40 matters in this apartment. $40 is the difference between a full tank of gas and driving on fumes to the next paycheck. There's a woman 2 cubicles over named Priya. She's a few years older, drives a 10-year-old Civic with a crack running diagonally across the windshield, and eats the same lunch every day. Rice, beans, whatever vegetable was cheapest that week. You assume, the way you assume things about people you don't really know yet, that she's just careful with money because she has to be. One Friday, waiting for the elevator, you mention you're thinking about opening one of those investment accounts you keep seeing ads for. You expect her to shrug. Instead, she says, "Do it before you talk yourself out of it. Nobody feels ready. That's kind of the point." You don't think much of it at the time. It's one sentence, said while an elevator door was closing. That weekend, you open a brokerage account anyway. You put in $50. It feels almost embarrassingly small. $50 into a fund with a name you don't fully understand, an index that tracks 500 companies you'll never personally deal with. You don't tell anyone. There's nothing to tell. $50 doesn't sound like a decision. It sounds like nothing. 3 weeks later, your car needs a new alternator. $610. You almost don't have it. You put $200 on a credit card and pay it off over 2 months, gritting your teeth every time the statement shows interest. That's level 1. Not glamorous. Not a story anyone would tell at a party. Just a $50 transfer, a cracked windshield coworker, and the quiet decision to keep going even when $40 still very much matters. Level 2. The boring years. 2 years pass. Nothing dramatic happens, and that turns out to be the entire point. You're 26 now. The $50 transfer became $75, then $125. Automated to leave your checking account the day after payday so you never have to decide about it twice. Your salary edges up to $54,000 after a role change. You don't feel richer. You just notice that the notebook has fewer stressful weeks in it. Priya, it turns out, isn't broke. She's aggressive about her 401k match and puts almost a third of every raise straight into her retirement account before she lets herself get used to having it. She tells you this over lunch one day, almost apologetically, like she's confessing something. "I just don't let the number in my checking account go up," she says. "If it doesn't build up there, I don't spend it." You start doing something similar. Every raise, you increase your automatic contribution before your monthly budget resets. It's not a strategy with a name. It's just, don't let the extra money learn your address. There's no scene here worth dramatizing. That's what these years feel like. You go to work. You come home. Occasionally, you check the account and it's up. Occasionally, the market drops and it's down, and you feel a small twist in your stomach, and then, mostly, you forget about it by Thursday. Your coworker Devin gets a promotion around this time. He leases a Tesla the same month. $612 a month, 3-year term. You don't judge him for it. He's not reckless. He works hard. He wanted something to show for it, and a car is a normal thing to want. That's what makes it worth mentioning. There was nothing unusual about his decision. Most people would have made it. You almost did too. You sat in the dealership's online configurator for 11 minutes one night, added the premium interior, watched the monthly payment change in real time. Then you closed the tab and went to bed. By the end of level 2, your account crosses $28,000. Nobody throws you a party for it. There's nothing to announce. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind you wouldn't remember if you hadn't been tracking the number. Level 3, when it stopped being theoretical. The account crosses $100,000 on a Sunday morning, and you find out almost by accident, refreshing the app while waiting for laundry to finish. You stare at it for a long moment. 6 figures. It's the kind of number that used to exist only in other people's lives. Parents, friends, financial articles, distant relatives who did well. Now it has your name on it. You don't buy anything to celebrate. You do something smaller and stranger. You sit very still for a minute, the way you do when something important happens and there's no one around to tell. This is also the year the market drops 19% in 5 months. You watch $100,000 become $84,000 on paper, and your stomach does the same twist it always does, except bigger this time because the number is bigger. You think about pulling everything into cash. You call your bank once and hang up before the hold music finishes. Instead, you do the boring thing again. You keep the automatic transfer running. $125 a paycheck goes in anyway, into a fund that's technically worth less per share than it was a month ago, which means, mathematically, you're buying more of it for the same money. Nobody explains this to you in a way that makes it feel good. It just feels like doing something stubborn while everyone around you talks about the news. 6 months later, the market recovers. Your account isn't just back to $100,000. It's at $118,000 because you never stopped buying on the way down. Devin, that same year, trades in the Tesla lease for a bigger one. New payment, $740 a month. He's not struggling exactly, but you notice he started picking up extra shifts on weekends, something he never used to do. You don't say anything. It's not your business, and besides, he seems happy. That's the uncomfortable part. He is happy. It's just a specific kind of happy that requires the next paycheck to show up on time, every time, indefinitely. You get a $310 unexpected bill that same month. A dental procedure your insurance half covers. 2 years ago, it would have gone on a card. This time, you pay it from checking without thinking twice, and you notice almost as an afterthought that you didn't think twice. That's the real milestone of level 3. Not the $100,000. The moment a $310 bill stopped being an emergency. Level 4, the crossover. 4 more years pass. You're 32. Your salary is $71,000. Your portfolio is $312,000. Here's what nobody tells you about this stage. It starts doing something your paycheck never could. In a single strong quarter, the account grows by $19,400, more than 3 months of your take-home pay, without you touching it, without a raise, without a promotion, without doing anything except leaving it alone. You sit with that for a while. Your job pays you for showing up and doing work. This money is paying you for having decided years ago not to spend it. You don't quit anything. You still show up Monday morning, badge still cracked at the corner from being dropped so many times you stopped noticing. But something has shifted in how you experience the job. It no longer feels like the only thing standing between you and disaster. It feels for the first time optional in a way you can't fully explain yet. Not today, not this year, but eventually. The old Toyota is still in the parking lot. 9 years old now, worth maybe $6,200. A coworker asks, not unkindly, when you're finally going to treat yourself. You laugh it off. You don't tell her the account crossed $300,000 last spring. You've learned that telling people rarely goes anywhere good. It either makes them uncomfortable or makes them start asking for advice you're not sure you're qualified to give. Priya, meanwhile, has hit her own version of this. She mentions, almost in passing, that her dividends last year covered 2 full months of her mortgage payment without her lifting a finger. She says it the way she says most financial things. Quietly, like it's not a big deal, even though it clearly is. That's the crossover. It's not a single dramatic day. It's the slow realization that the money has started working independently of you, not instead of your labor, but alongside it, occasionally outperforming it, and you no longer fully control which one is carrying more weight. Level 5. Having to versus choosing to. By 35, the portfolio sits at $640,000. Your job offers you a promotion, regional lead, $14,000 raise, more travel, more meetings, considerably more stress. 2 years ago, you'd have said yes instinctively. This time, you sit with the offer for 4 days. You turn it down, not because the money isn't good, because you do the math and realize the raise after taxes comes out to roughly what your portfolio already earns in an average month when the market cooperates. The promotion would trade your evenings and your Sundays for a number your money is already producing on its own, quietly, without asking anything of you. Your manager is confused. Most people would kill for this, she says. She's not wrong. A year ago, you might have too. This is the part that's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. The freedom doesn't look like anything. You don't buy a house. You don't buy a car. The Toyota, now 11 years old, finally needs replacing. The transmission is going, and you buy a used Honda for $14,000 in cash and feel nothing dramatic about it either way. It's just a car. It gets you to work. Where the freedom actually shows up is smaller. Your sister calls, stressed about a $2,200 repair on her furnace right before winter. You send it without hesitation and without mentioning it again. Devin, still leasing, still working weekends, mentions he's thinking about picking up a third job to cover a car repair. You don't offer him money. That's not your relationship. But you notice, with something between sympathy and quiet unease, how different the same kind of bad week feels for each of you now. You start saying no to overtime. Not because you need less money. You'll always want more on some level, everyone does. But because you no longer need this particular hour badly enough to sell it. Having to versus choosing to. That's the whole difference, and almost nobody outside your bank app can see it. Level 6. The part nobody warned you about. Which brings you back to the ironing board, the chipped table, the $1,142,600 you glanced at like a weather report. Here's what the number doesn't fix, and what nobody mentions when they talk about hitting 7 figures. It gets quieter in here than you expected. Your old friends from the claims job still talk about their weekends the same way. Car payments, credit card balances, the occasional vacation they're still paying off in March. You used to be fully inside those conversations. Now you nod along, and there's a half-second delay before you respond because you're translating your reality into a language that still fits theirs. You don't correct anyone. You don't mention the number. It would change the room in a way you don't want. Priya understands this without you having to explain it. She's a few years further down the same road. You start feeling weird being the only one at the table who isn't stressed about money, she tells you once, over the same cheap lunch she's always eaten, even now. Like you have to perform being normal. That's the cost nobody warned you about. Not a bill, not a loss. A kind of quiet distance from people you still care about, built entirely out of a number you never talk about. There's also the fear, which surprised you the first time it showed up. The fear of losing it. You'd think crossing 1 million would settle something. Instead, some Sunday nights you catch yourself checking the account twice in an hour during a rough market week, the same twist in your stomach from level 3, except now there's more on the line and, somehow, less certainty about why it still bothers you at all. But there's something else too. Something that outweighs the loneliness most days. You paid your sister's furnace bill without flinching. You said no to a promotion that would have cost you your Sundays. You drive a car that's 12 years old combined, across 2 vehicles, and you've never once needed it to say anything about you. The shirt finishes ironing. You hang it on the back of a kitchen chair. The same chipped table, the same instant coffee, the same 410 square foot habits you never fully outgrew, in an apartment 2 sizes bigger than the one you started in. 9 years ago, a coworker with a cracked windshield told you, almost by accident, to stop waiting to feel ready. You didn't know, standing in that elevator, that the sentence would still be doing work in your life a decade later. The car outside is worth $14,000. The coffee still costs less than $1 a cup. The bank app, if you opened it right now, would say $1,142,600, give or take whatever the market did overnight. Nothing about the outside of your life changed as much as you once assumed it would. What changed was quieter than that, and it happened so gradually you almost missed it happening at all. If this story made you think differently about what wealth actually looks like from the inside, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this one. And I'm curious, if your bank account crossed 7 figures tomorrow, would anyone around you be able to tell? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.